This time I have a Sony SLV675. This is a VHS hi-fi machine. Nothing fancy, just a plain Jane hi-fi VHS machine. Not worth spending a lot of money on, but I said I'd look at this and see whether there's anything I can do. So we're going to get into this one. Guy says he thought it had a power supply problem, but it's actually a little bit more involved than that. Let's check this one out. This is an SLV675 Sony. Don't know what's wrong with it. It was brought in. Asked me to have a look at it, so before I plug it in, I'm going to pull the top off it. We'll give it a visual inspection before powering it up. This is why we always do an inspection before powering things up, because you see the tape in this case is wrapped around the back side of the drum, and there's a lot of tape spilled out here. The guides are in the loaded position. Okay, let's just power this thing up now and just see exactly what it does, if it does anything. I'd like to see this tape go back into the spool. Got power. You just hit eject. The tape's at the end, so it's okay, the unit's powered up, but nothing else. Head drum is spinning, and the unit's powered up. Okay, I hear the loading motor running now, but nothing else. Doesn't attempt to move the mechanism. First things first, we'll remove the front cover. What the problem is going to be on this one, for starters, is this plastic is cracked. This goes onto the motor, and this is what turns the mechanism. And if I can turn this around, we might be able to even see the crack in it. But there's going to be a crack in this that's causing the motor shaft to slip. If I flip this piece a bit with a screwdriver, I might be able to get it to turn a bit, because it's in a jam state right now. Okay, let's just see whether I plug it in now, whether it'll try to move the gear. Still slipping. There we go. I got the tape to rewind back into the cassette. Now I just got to get the unit to eject the tape. After coaxing it a bit by just helping the gear move, I got the tape to eject. So now I got to remove the mechanism to get to that loading motor to repair it. And what it's going to require is to have the nylon has cracked. You're going to have to glue it back down to the motor shaft itself. So let's pull the mechanism out to do that. Remove the arrow mark screws in the chassis. And of course undo the plugs. Unplug we'll just take the entire erase head off, since it decided to fall right off anyway. Unplug the drum and undo the audio control head. And maybe another screw or two on the bottom that has to come out on this. Oh, there's two more down the side here. And then the chassis will lift out. And there's one more plug that goes into the bottom of the drum. That drum motor, we'll unplug that. Okay, now I can put the chassis aside, or put the electronics aside, so that I can work on the chassis. Where our fault is right here on this loading motor. That's the problem. Remove the tooth belt first. Then I should be able to remove this whole mechanism. There's a couple screws that hold it in place. There's one down here, which I need to get to. Lift the motor brake control out of the way. The mode switch is right here on this one. Now, as long as I don't turn the mechanism, I don't have to worry about the timing going off. There are timing marks, though, that we have to remember where they all are. Yeah, that one's timed. There's a timing mark right there that indicates where it is on the mechanism. And this chassis assembly should lift out just like that. Okay, we can leave that in place. The timing marks are right there, and there's another one right on the end of that gear. This is where the fault is, right here on this. So I'll remove the. I don't want to move the position of the gears, although they are timed. I don't want to move anything from where it is right now. Remove the cut washer, so I can remove this gear, and then I can get the motor out of here so that I can repair the piece that's broken. Set that there so nothing touches. Here's where our part is broken. This is slipping because there's a crack in the plastic. That's causing that to slide around. You can see the crack, it's right there. You see the crack right there? So that's causing this to slip. So what I need to do is I need to put some epoxy on and glue that back onto the shaft. So what I'm going to do is to make sure there's no oil. So I'm going to get some isopropanol on the shaft and make sure that there's no oil on here, because otherwise the epoxy is not going to set up properly. Next, I mix up a small amount of epoxy, just the very smallest amount, because we don't need much here, and the rest of it would just be going to waste. So mix up a little bit of epoxy. We'll put some onto the end of the gear here so that it will go right inside the shaft when I put it back onto the end of the motor. And we'll set this up on the motor. Put a little bit more around the shaft, but not onto the actual motor itself, onto the casing. Just enough to hopefully seal this up.
Now the problem with these nylon parts is that over time the nylon and plastic shrinks, and of course the metal shaft doesn't. So something's got to give, and it's always the plastic. And this is a really common problem on these machines with this white nylon plastic crap.
Okay, now to let it set up for a while, let that dry, and then we'll reassemble the machine and see if it works. I'm just putting the motor back in. It hasn't set up yet. I want to get this in place before the epoxy hardens too much, because any adjustments need to be made obviously before it's completely set up. So I'm just fastening the motor back in. When you put the unit back together, you got to make sure that the main cam is in the fully unloaded position, which is pushed up against the far end here. There are a couple of catches that you have to pull. You have to pull the brakes away, otherwise what will happen is this gear won't be in position. It'll be sitting down like that. So to make sure that that gear is in position, you have to pull both of these down. To pull this lever in place, and you got to pull both of these levers out of position so that they are locked into place, so that the cam gear is sitting in its track. When it's in the unloaded position, you should see the pin through the hole right there. You should see that pin. Now the gear is properly in place, the cam gear is in place. We can look on the top side and we'll see the alignment marks here, which is by turning this gear, you'll see the alignment marks. There's an arrow that points right here at this gear, and then there's this one here. This indicates it's in the unloaded position, the longer tooth, and you'll see the holes. You can see through the chassis right here. There's an alignment hole right there that you can see through, and there's another alignment hole over here that you can see through. That's indicating that the chassis is completely unloaded. And yes, it is easier if you pull the basket to deal with this. There's just 2 screws that hold it on. Now this plate should drop into place. Our alignment on this is as follows. There's this little mark here, this little triangle or little diamond mark, points towards this gear here, right? Points towards the loading gear. This is for the front loader, and there's a hole that lines up as well right there, which you can see through. If I shine a flashlight down from below, you'll see the light shining through that hole right there. There's a hole right there. Okay, now that that's in position, I should be able to hold this together and drop the mechanism in place. It'll just drop in place just like that. Now we can throw some screws in it, and we can operate this one manually with a power supply just to make sure that everything goes through the motion. I did kind of try to fix up that crack in the plastic. How long that's going to be any good for is anyone's guess. It hasn't broken through completely, but you can certainly see where it is cracking. So if I put power, I should be able to load the mechanism up. Okay, the loading mechanism goes into place just like that. Pinch roller engages, and then it goes into the search position. If I reverse it, the pinch roller will re-engage, and then it should disengage, and the mechanism unloads, and it does the tape unload. So should be able to put the front loader back on now, reassemble the unit, and fingers crossed it's going to work.
In case you guys are wondering what that whistling sound is on so many videos, it's actually an electric clock that's on the other side of the shop. It's that old AC powered electric clock from like the 1960s that keeps perfect time, but it likes to whistle. And it's so faint that I can barely hear it, but the microphone sure can hear it, especially when it's quiet. Yeah, you see, it took the cassette, that crack gear on the motor. Even though I glued it, it's, you see it here? See what I mean? Of course, it's not responding properly now because it's seeing light hitting the detectors here, so it thinks that the tape's broken or something. Eject is this one.
this thing's shot. Look at, there's a crack here. This gear's got a crack in it too. No wonder the front loading mechanism's not working properly. It's not load. It's coming up at an angle because that gear has a crack in it, as you can see as well. I'm going to write this one off. This one here is just not going to be economical to repair. Unfortunately, it's got too many plastic parts that are cracked. It needs this replaced for sure, because there's a crack there. It needs this piece that goes on the motor here, this collar. I tried gluing it, but it's still slipping. The main slide has a crack in it. I kind of fused that with my soldering iron to keep it from opening up, but how long that would last is anybody's guess. So the main slide needs to be replaced. This gear here, the loading arm on the take-up side, needs to be replaced. And that loading motor coupling needs to be replaced. That just adds up to way too much money to spend on a regular VHS machine. There's nothing fancy about this. You can go down to Value Village and probably pick one up for about 30 bucks. In fact, I could probably sell one of mine for what it would cost to fix this one. So I'm going to leave this one at this point and let the guy that owns it know that it's just not worth going forward with, because there's just too many plastic parts that are broken, and the other ones aren't going to be far behind, because this plastic now is all going to be very, very brittle at this stage of the game. So, thanks for watching.